So Bootstrap used in MVC. So the layout view includes the Bootstrap classes that we are using to format the page, and we have been updating to Bootstrap 4. The two primary areas that are really different is the navigation bar, and the other area that is really different is there are no glyphicons in Bootstrap 4. So those are two areas that really changed. What I've done is I've kind of given you a little cheat sheet here. Basically, it tells you different Bootstrap commands and, maybe a condensed format. These are all Bootstrap 4. Okay, so you may want to download this because it's not that many pages. It's a one-stop shop. Sometimes it's a PDF. So sometimes if you copy from PDF, it does copy hidden characters. So what I recommend, you're going to do any kind of copying, and using it for like a template, is that you open up Notepad. Throw it in here because this is a text editor and it strips out hidden codes. Okay, and from here you can copy and paste into Visual Studio. So you guys, we've been working with Bootstrap for a little while, so you've probably already picked up on the fact that it's pretty easy. It's based on classes. You just have to know what classes to apply. It is a responsive format, and it is a mobile-first approach. And the idea behind mobile first is if it looks good on mobile, it's going to look good everywhere. It's also got cross-browser compatibility built in, so you don't have to worry, oh, is this going to look okay in Microsoft Edge and Firefox and Opera and all of the different browsers. Page structure is pretty much the same as HTML5 structure. And where all of this is incorporated is into the layout view. And we've already looked at the layout view. You'll also notice in the layout view that we have this meta tag with Viewport, because this is a standard tag for a mobile-friendly page. In fact, if you don't say initial scale 1, the data on your page, if you view it in mobile, can come out super small. In Bootstrap, the entire site is wrapped in a container, and there's two different container classes. There is container fluid, which is full width, and then there is just container, which is a fixed width. And if you wanted to play around with those, you can select the links. I've got interactive sites linked in. Bootstrap does use the grid system. And so if you want the grid system, it's very similar to what you learned in the 180 class. If you remember, the 180 class split the page into 12 columns. And so your goal was to set the columns using the column classes so that they equal 12. And that's the same thing here. The difference is that they've got call dash small, medium, large, or extra large, depending on the device. Then it's dash, and then basically it's a number 1 through 12. So the goal is for the numbers to add up to 12 because 12 is a full page. So here I've got 4 and 8, which equals 12, and you can see how big those are. Okay, so this is very similar to the grid system that we used in 180. It's just that we're using Bootstrap classes instead, and we have to throw in small, medium, large, or extra large in the middle. For headings, Bootstrap recognizes the heading tags, heading 1 through 6, and also display tags. And the display tags are quite a bit larger than the heading tags. So this may be something that is useful to take a look at. So you can see the display tags here. Or the display classes. And if I take the display class out and run it, so look at display 1, you can see how much bigger than heading 1 display 1 was. So let me reload it here. There's display 1. And if I take that class out and run it, you can see that's what heading 1 looks like as far as size. Colors. So Bootstrap has all of these built-in colors. And so they have contextual meaning. And basically what that means is this blue means it's a primary color, green is success, lighter blue is for info, yellow is warning, red is danger. Okay, secondary, then we have light and dark. So I've got examples over here that basically show you what it looks like. And also I'm trying to tell you what that color is used for. Okay, and so you can use those colors in the background or for text or for both. You can see that I've got both of them used here. For tables, we've already used some of the table formatting. Basically, saying class equal table gives you a Bootstrap table, okay? And you have to include the table class. But then if you want some additional formatting, like you want the rows striped, and they kind of display like this, or you want a border around the table, or you want a color to change when you're pointing at it, okay? You can use hover. If the table is really wide, you can use table condensed to kind of smash more of it together. Also, there's table responsive. So there's all sorts of different table settings you can use or classes that you can include along with table. Jumbotron is that nice, thick, colored heading. It's a large box, typically used for a heading section, so you can kind of pull the attention there. For buttons. So in Bootstrap, button default is the default for all of the buttons. And it's kind of boring. So you can see that we have other buttons that you can use. And they basically, you just apply button dash and then whatever of the colors that you want to use. In the views that are generated, create, edit, and delete all have buttons. They also include links. Okay, so just be aware of that if it's a link and you change the button default, it's not really going to change how it looks if it's an action link. So for icons, this is a huge change between Bootstrap 3 and 4. Bootstrap 3 had glyphicons included. Bootstrap 4 does not. So they expect you to use the Google icons that come with Google fonts, or you can use Font Awesome. Font Awesome has free icons, but they also have icons that you have to pay for. Icons can be, they're typically black, but you can apply color to them just like you apply color to text. Okay, so I colored this little running dude and the happy wizard hat. You can also include icons in your buttons, okay, and that's what I did here. So this basically shows you how to use the Font Awesome icons. And if you're not super familiar with icons, I think it's easier to go into W3 Schools because they have lots of examples. Because when you include the icon in the heading section of your page, So in our views, the heading section is in the layout view, okay? You have to include this script tag. That pulls in the icon library. And it's not super apparent when you go to the Font Awesome site that you have to pull in the library. Okay, so they have free icons and then they have ones that you have to pay for, which we do not want to do. So we're going to choose the free ones. So you kind of look through here and you'll notice that they've got all sorts of different categories. So these are the ones that deal with computers. Oh, there's a lovely little mouse or mobile device. So if you like the mobile device, you click on it. These are vector icons, I can tell, because they've got basically these vector sizing handles on them. And if this is an icon that we wanted to use, the code that we have to stick in is located right here. Okay, and you can actually copy it and paste it. So in this sense, it does make it fairly easy, but you don't really know what script to include at the top. That is not readily apparent, okay? And that is why I like this better. So if we go into here, this is W3 Schools, and they have all of these categories of Font Awesome fonts. So we can go in and pick computers. In fact, we can find that same little mobile device and we can hit try it. And here it's got, oh, look, that's what we have to include in the head section. Not only that, it's got examples showing the default size and a little bigger, colored, how it looks in a button. Okay, so to me, this is super useful. Okay, and then if you wanted to add it with Unicode, how that would also look. Okay, so you can get different ideas coming into W3 Schools. In fact, if you wanted to play around with color and size and find one you like, that would be great. Okay, so here is the actual code that I used to generate these different examples up here. And so on my examples, you'll notice they all start with FAS, but not all of the icons start with FAS. Some begin with just FA, some have FAR, some have FAB. So that's something that you need to pay attention to. In fact, this is an example that I have in MVC that we're going to be adding later. And you'll notice this one starts with FAR. So in addition to Font Awesome, you can use Google Fonts. And probably the easiest place for you to grab those is going to be W3 Schools. The nice thing I will tell you about using the Google font icons is that the link that you put in is your link to Google Fonts, and the place that you get the icons is material icons. Okay, so that is like a little class that they have specifically for icons. And then in between the opening and the closing tags, this is the name of the icon. The only problem with the icons is they just don't have as many. Okay, so here are all the different categories. Okay, and the way that you put them in is you include that Google font link to the library. The link is always the same. So we can take a look at the mouse here. So it's material icons. It's that library that we are linking to. Okay. And then the way you set up the I tag is always the same. So what differs is the actual name of the icon itself. Okay, so this one was mouse, but you can see this is phone Android, phone iPhone. Okay, so there's no spaces, so you're going to get underscores between the names. Here's add a photo. So you can just see they do have a lot of choices. Okay, and you can change the color just like you change the color for font. You can add them to buttons. Okay, and so these three, this is the code that I used for those. So for the navigation menus, I told you this is an area that has changed a lot, and I've been giving you code to accommodate Bootstrap 4. So we have our horizontal navigation menu, and you can see that we've got navigation items and navigation links. And for MVC, we've kind of combined those, but in a normal navigation menu, you'd have something like this. You'd have an unordered list. Well, first of all, you would have a container. Everything's in a container. Then you would have your unordered list. And then your link would be a nav item, or your line would be a nav item, and the link itself would be a navigation link. Okay, and that would be how it would look. Okay, so the default here is for a horizontal menu. You can do a vertical menu. Let me show you. This is how the vertical one looks. And to convert it from horizontal to vertical, all you have to do is add flex column. And this is up there in the nav tag. Everything else is the same. And you can create a tabbed menu. So how does that look? It looks like this. Okay, so we still have class of a container. In the unordered list, we specify nav tabs. And then if you wanted a background color, which I did, you can specify that as well. But the lines are still nav items. The links are still nav links. For the navigation bar, you'll notice that we have a nav class of Nav Bar. Then you'll notice that we have Nav Bar expand, and you can also apply a color. So menu items and links have to be added using unordered lists. We saw that in the nav example, and here it is in Nav Bar. And all of our LI tags are nav items. Your links are nav links. Okay, so that part doesn't really change. So for tags, UL, navbar.nav, nav item, nav link. So the nav tag itself, you're going to tell it you have a nav bar. And you could tell it it's the default, or you could make it responsive, which is what that is doing. Okay, and you can apply a color. If you wanted to go vertical, you have to remove nav bar expand. Okay, so if I didn't want the horizontal, I could take this out, and then I've got a vertical bar. And yeah, I did not give an example of that because that's not exactly what we're using in our MVC apps. If you prefer, like you'll notice the text here is above the nav bar, but if you want it in the nav bar, then it has to become a brand or a logo. So here we've got Nav Bar expand, background of dark. So this is giving us the horizontal responsive dark background. And you'll notice that right after that, the very first thing, even before I get into the buttons, which are my links, that's where I'm putting this Nav Bar brand. It's a dummy link, so it's not going to go anywhere, but it's just where I've got the little heading displayed. So that's how you get it inside. And that is what we've been doing in MVC. Also in MVC, let me pull up. Okay, so here we've got Contasso University. That would be the logo brand. Then we've got our links. Got a couple over here, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And if we make it more mobile, you'll notice there's a little hamburger here. So if we click on it, you can see that we get the menu that way. So to create that, this is the syntax that you need to add. So you're basically creating a toggle button. And you'll notice that we have a target. This is the area that we actually want to collapse. And then we have a span class navbar toggler icon. This is the hamburger. And then we've got the closing button. So the target is kind of important because that is the area of the menu that we don't want to see in mobile. And you will notice that right above the unordered list, that is where we have the ID collapse or collapsible nav bar. So this is connecting to this. So when the screen is small enough that that hamburger is going to display, anything that is inside this div area is going to be hidden, okay? And that is why when we widen this up, it's not hiding things, and it's only hiding things when we get to a certain width. So this is the entire block of code for that nav bar. Okay, and then here is for the branding, so we can get the text in the bar. Here is the hamburger. Okay, we've got the target here that connects to the ID. So when the hamburger shows, this section is collapsed or it doesn't display. And then these are the navigation items. And so here's how that translates to MVC. So what's the difference? Well, in MVC, we have HTML helpers that are creating action links. And those action links are in place of the anchor tags. So here we've got the HTML helper action link instead of an anchor. And what that means for us is that we have to take the nav item and the nav link and stick them in the line. Okay, so we had to make that adjustment for MVC. Now, how do we get the code over on the right-hand side? How do we get this? So the way we get the code over on the right, and this is kind of tricky, is we have the code that we want, the links that we want on the left in their own unordered list. And then anything we want over on the right, we put in a separate unordered list, and we give it a class of margin left auto. And giving it that class of margin left auto shoves the items over to the right. Okay, so that is actually pretty slick. And you can see I added some font awesome icons to my text over there. Okay, so this would be how it looks in MVC. And there's a lot more information on nav bars if you are curious. I kind of focused on the things that we would be using in our MVC apps, but if you want to know more, I did include a link. And that brings me to forms. So forms have also changed in Bootstrap 4. We basically have a full width form and an inline form. And there's a couple different classes for inline form. And the one that you are definitely going to want to use is inline dash check dash form. And this is what a stacked full width form looks like. And this is what the inline dash or form dash check dash inline looks like. This is the one you want to use. Okay, because everything lines up very nicely. And I will just quick show you. The form horizontal is no longer used. And what's really interesting is that in pretty much all of our forms that were generated, it says class equal form horizontal. That no longer exists. So it's just defaulting to form. So if, let's see, if I look at this edit, I think it's still on the edit. So this is basically form. So if I change this to inline and make sure you use check inline, let me save it. Let's reload it. And I'm going to widen this up because it's not going to look good. It's basically going to spread it in a single line across the page. And you will notice that it does kind of chop off some of these entry areas because it is trying to fit everything in. Now let me just change it. Instead of the check inline, let me show you how horrible inline looks. This is not one that you want to use. It wraps, it looks awful. Honestly, I would never use this. See how it's wrapping? It looks hideous. So don't use that one. If you change it to inline, use the check inline. And I would only change it to inline for a pretty short form that doesn't have a lot of entry areas. And let me switch it back to just form. Now I'm not going to do form horizontal because technically in Bootstrap 4 that does not exist. Okay, so it's basically just using form. Okay, so those are the two that you're either going to use, form or form check inline. Bootstrap does include some of these form controls. There's a form group class. Okay, and you'll notice that for every label and input, it's got a form group kind of as a wrapper. Okay, and then it also has a separate class for radio buttons and whatnot. So I'll let you kind of look through there. And we are going to practice modifying some of our pages using Bootstrap 4.